All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the incredible chronological domino effect that sparked one of the absolute greatest conflicts in literary history, the epic Mahabharata. We're going to see exactly how a single vow, a handful of tragic mistakes, and some intense generational curses locked an entire royal bloodline into a totally inescapable destiny. I am so excited to guide you through this because when you actually lay it all out, the sprawling family tree of the Kuru dynasty transforms from a confusing list of names into this brilliantly structured narrative of cause and effect. It really shows us how small, relatable human flaws can trigger massive geopolitical catastrophes.
Okay, let's quickly hit our roadmap. We've organized this history into 6 key stages: Bhishma's vow, the expansion of the Kuruvansh, Pandu's exile, the births of the rival cousins, their return to Hastinapur, and finally, their childhood rivalry and the poison that started it all.
Starting off with Stage 1, Bhishma's historic vow, which is really the spark of destiny here.
So, our story kicks off with King Shantanu of Hastinapur. He falls head over heels for a beautiful fisherman's daughter named Satyavati. But there's a massive roadblock. You see, Shantanu already has an adult son, Devavrata, who is highly capable and the rightful heir to the dynasty. The fisherman, he's not having it. He basically says Shantanu can only marry Satyavati if her future son inherits the throne, not Devavrata. Shantanu is completely heartbroken and falls into a deep depression. It's a classic action-consequence loop, right? The king's lust creates an immediate succession crisis, leaving his devoted son to take it upon himself to clean up the mess.
And Devavrata steps up in a huge way. To secure the marriage for his dad, he goes to the fisherman and makes an absolutely unbelievable sacrifice. He doesn't just step down as heir, he drops this terrifying pledge. Even if the earth gives up its scent or the sun its light, I will not break my vow of lifelong celibacy. He guarantees that he will never, ever have children who could challenge Satyavati's bloodline. This one monumental sacrifice earns him the name Bhishma, meaning the terrible or the one who took a fierce vow. It solves the immediate problem for sure, but man, it completely derails the royal lineage.
Which leads us to Stage 2, the unexpected expansion of Kuruvansh, basically a bloodline in total crisis.
Because Bhishma's noble vow, it backfires almost instantly. Satyavati does have 2 sons with King Shantanu, but tragedy strikes hard. Chitrangada gets killed in a fierce battle with a celestial Gandharva warrior, and Vichitravirya dies really young from a wasting disease. Completely childless, absolute panic hits Hastinapur. The royal bloodline is literally facing extinction. So Satyavati is forced to rely on an ancient practice. She hits the emergency button and calls in the great sage Vyasa for a miraculous intervention to bless Vichitravirya's widows with children.
And this part brilliantly illustrates how human flaws during conception translate directly into physical traits in the next generation. When Sage Vyasa approaches the widow Ambika, she's so terrified by his rugged, ascetic look that she tightly shuts her eyes. The result? Her son, Dhritarashtra, is born blind. The second widow, Ambalika, turns pale white with fear, making her son Pandu born pale and physically super weak. Finally, a devoted maidservant approaches the sage with calm reverence, and she bears Vidura, who is born perfectly healthy, endlessly wise, and impeccably just. These physical traits literally set the stage for all the political instability to come.
Moving right into Stage 3, Pandu's exile and curse, or the incredibly steep price of a mistake.
So, since Dhritarashtra is blind from birth and Vidura is a maid's son, the pale, fragile Pandu actually gets crowned king of Hastinapur. But while out on a hunting trip in the forest, Pandu knocks over his own tragic domino. He shoots an arrow at a mating deer, having absolutely no clue it's actually a powerful sage named Rishi Kandama in disguise. With his dying breath, the sage drops a devastating curse. Because Pandu killed him in a moment of intimacy, Pandu will suffer the exact same fate. If he ever embraces his wives with desire, boom, instant death.
Talk about a heavy burden. The weight of this curse completely alters the destiny of the kingdom. Stripped of the ability to father heirs and just drowning in guilt, King Pandu throws in the towel. He gives up all the royal luxuries, hands over the kingdom, and retreats into the treacherous Himalayan forests to live as an ascetic hermit alongside his 2 devoted wives, Kunti and Madri. The huge takeaway here is that this self-imposed exile leaves his blind brother, Dhritarashtra, as the de facto ruler back in Hastinapur, creating a very dangerous lingering power vacuum.
Now we hit Stage 4, the birth of Kauravas and Pandavas. Lots of miracles and omens happening here.
So now we've got a split screen, the blind king in the palace and the cursed king in the forest. And miraculously, both camps are about to welcome kids at the exact same time. Since Pandu can't physically touch his wives, it looks like game over for his lineage. But Kunti drops a total bombshell. She reveals a secret mantra from her youth that lets her summon literally any deity to bless her with a child. Pandu is desperate, so they go for it. Kunti summons Dharmaraj to father Yudhishthira, the wind god Vayu to father the insanely strong Bhima, and the king of gods Indra to father the supreme warrior Arjuna. She then shares the mantra with Madri, who gets the Ashwini Kumars for the handsome twins Nakula and Sahadeva. Despite a lethal curse, the exiled king suddenly has 5 divinely powered, ultra-capable heirs. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Dhritarashtra's wife Gandhari is also pregnant, and the sources practically hit you over the head with the contrasting omens for the 2 eldest cousins to heavily foreshadow their eventual clash. Out in the forest, Yudhishthira is born under perfect, auspicious stars, with the celestial voice declaring he'll be a righteous king. But in the palace, when Gandhari's eldest, Duryodhana, is born, he brays like a donkey. Jackals howl, crazy winds blow, random fires erupt across the city. The wise uncle Vidura actually begs the blind king to abandon the child, warning that these omens mean Duryodhana is going to destroy their entire dynasty. But a father's blind love wins out.
And get this, the 5 Pandava brothers aren't just facing one rival. Gandhari had a boon. She's about to have 100 sons, who we come to know as the Kauravas.
Now, how exactly does someone have 100 sons all at once? Well, the text outlines this bizarre and completely fascinating supernatural intervention by sage Vyasa. Gandhari is pregnant for 2 whole years and eventually delivers this hard, iron-like mass of flesh. She's super frustrated, ready to just toss it away, but Vyasa stops her. He sprinkles water on it, divides it into 100 thumb-sized pieces, and pops them into individual jars of ghee. They incubate in there for another 2 years before finally developing into the 100 Kaurava brothers.
All right, stage 5, return to Hastinapur and new conflict. The orphans arrive. The board is officially set. 100 Kauravas growing up in royal luxury, 5 divine Pandavas growing up in the rough forest. But then, tragedy strikes. One beautiful spring day, Pandu is just overcome by desire, forgets the curse entirely, and forcefully embraces Madri. Just like that, the curse takes him. Overcome with guilt, Madri commits sati, joining him on the funeral pyre. Their peaceful forest life is totally shattered. The ascetic sages gather up the widowed Kunti and these 5 superpowered, grieving orphan boys and march them straight back to the gates of Hastinapur, dropping them right back into the royal family.
So put yourself in that palace for a second. The blind king and his 100 sons have been living it up comfortably, basically treating the kingdom like it's exclusively theirs. Suddenly, a delegation of ascetics shows up at the front door with 5 legitimate, divinely born princes who actually hold a stronger claim to the throne. How on earth are the ambitious, omen-cursed Duryodhana and his 99 brothers going to react to the sudden arrival of these rightful heir cousins?
Which brings us to our final stage, stage 6. Childhood rivalry and poison, or the very first strike.
Almost instantly, the royal palace turns into this wildly intense playground of rivalry. And a lot of it comes down to the young Pandavas being just physically dominant. Bhima, the wind god's son, he is an absolute powerhouse. He single-handedly outcompetes all 100 Kaurava brothers in literally every sport. And to be honest, he's a bit of a playground bully. The text talks about him dragging the Kauravas by their hair, grabbing 10 of them at once and holding them underwater until they nearly drown, and kicking tree trunks so hard the kids just tumble out of the branches like ripe fruit. For Bhima, it's playful childishness, no real malice, but for Duryodhana, it brews a deep, dark, and murderous resentment.
That resentment explodes into a shocking first strike. Duryodhana invites Bhima to a beautiful water resort and feeds him sweets loaded with a totally lethal poison called Kalakuta. When Bhima passes out, Duryodhana ties him up with heavy vines and rolls him off a cliff into the deep, churning Ganga River. Bhima sinks all the way down to Nagalok, the realm of the serpentine Nagas. But here's the crazy part. It miraculously backfires. The Nagas viciously bite the unconscious Bhima, and the venom from their fangs actually neutralizes the poison in his stomach. He wakes up, snaps the vines, and the Naga King, seeing his divine bloodline, lets him drink a magical elixir. 8 days later, Bhima emerges from the river not dead, but practically bursting with the strength of 10,000 elephants.
When Bhima gets back and spills the beans to his brothers about what Duryodhana did, they are completely ready to erupt. But their wise uncle Vidura steps in and delivers a masterclass in strategic patience. He urges the Pandavas to keep the whole assassination attempt a total secret. If they accuse the king's favorite son of murder right now, they trigger an immediate, bloody civil war, and as young orphans, they just aren't ready to win that yet. So, the Pandavas zip their lips. They pretend absolutely nothing happened, just quietly growing stronger in the background.
And so the dominoes of resentment are locked permanently into place. The terrifying vows of celibacy, a blind king's ambition, supernatural incubators, and poisoned sweets have built a rock-solid foundation of absolute distrust. With the assassination swept under the rug and the Pandavas masking their true immense power, what spark is finally going to ignite this generational powder keg into the catastrophic, full-scale war of the Mahabharata? Well, that is a question that primes us perfectly for our next deep dive. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on this explainer. I hope breaking it down visually like this really illuminated the fascinating origins of this epic tale. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.